Dr Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And I just want to build on what some of my colleagues have said in relation to Part 2 of this Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill number 2, and particularly speak to clauses 50 through 62A in terms of the transitional arrangements that are going to occur in here. And I think that what we see is the complexity of the phasing in of these changes and the transitional arrangements that we're going to have in order to implement the changes that are embedded in this legislation really speak very much to the tinkering that is going on in this legislation and how it really is fiddling around the edges and not addressing some of the bigger issues around access to tertiary education in this country through loans and allowances. And I just want to reiterate what my colleagues who have spoken before me have alluded to in terms of the shifting of the Henry VIII clause into Part 1 of the legislation, that what we're having is that a lot of the concerns that were there really do need to still be there in Part 2. But if we have a look at these transitional arrangements, and to pick up on the point that Holly Walker made, that when we're thinking about this, we do need to think that this isn't just about students who are currently studying. This is about graduates. And I was saying in my last contribution before I was cut off in my last contribution on Part 1 of this bill, is that I'm one of the growing number of parliamentarians in this place for whom student loans are not a theoretical issue. That I have a student loan and I list it on my pecuniary interest, as a growing number of parliamentarians here do. And in terms of this isn't just small little changes that you fiddle around with, because I know that for many members of my peer group, people who are my friends who are my age, these kinds of changes about how things like this are phased in, how it's done, and the fairness and the equity in terms of how these changes are made are really some of the do or die factors of whether or not they stay in New Zealand, about whether they stay here and whether they contribute to our country and use their skills and their training and their education that could be for the betterment of all New Zealand if they do choose to stay here and do it. And I think this is something that we do have to bear in mind all the time when we are looking at how we bring these in. Because I think a lot of the things, and my colleague David Cunliffe went through some of these transitional arrangements in quite a lot of details about when it is that, and if we have a look, for example, in clause 57 of the bill, of when it is that the Commissioner may grant relief from late payment interest, and how it is that that is going to be used, so that actually what we're trying to achieve in this legislation is to create a fairer student loan system by saying everybody who borrows should actually be paying back their student loan, and Labor supports that element of the bill. But what we don't want is any provisions in this bill to be an impediment to people coming back to New Zealand, to being able to face up to their loan and to make the payments that are needed. So that we do need to make sure that we have fairness and that we have equity in how we are implementing these transitional arrangements, because these do make a difference. These aren't theoretical situations. These are the very rules that every day young New Zealanders who have left to live in other countries, these are the kind of rules that they make their decisions about whether they stay or whether they go on. The other point I'd like to know in terms of the complexities of the transitional arrangements and in terms of the implementation of this is the infrastructure that's going to be needed to implement it. That what we're going to have is a whole lot of different rates and different offsets that are going to operate for a period of time while we phase in these changes. And I mean, that's inevitable with any piece of legislation, we are supporting this legislation, but the point that Labor would like to make is that we do have some questions around the technology that is going to be needed to implement this legislation, about whether it will be in place and whether we will be able to phase these changes in the way in which this legislation sets out in these transitional arrangements in Section 2 of this bill. Because I think what everybody in this House is after is actually a way in which to make this scheme fairer, and that is why Labor is happy to support this legislation. But what we would like to see is a scheme that did actually go to more fundamentally address these access to tertiary education in New Zealand. That we do have a way in which New Zealanders can access our polytechnics, that they can access our universities, and that they can access training and education at all levels. And we don't want to, we don't want to see this limited, Mr. Chairman.
Megan Woods.
We don't want to see this limited, and we want to see all New Zealanders given this opportunity. And we wouldn't like to see any impediments in terms of how this legislation is going to be implemented, put it up to there. My colleague spoke in relation to Part 2 of this bill. Holly Walker spoke about how it is that we have seen an attack on student access by this government throughout this term and in the previous term, that there really has been an agenda to dampen down demand in terms of transferring people from student allowance in terms of borrowing it and being saddled with that debt in terms of student loans. So this is something that we do need to bear in mind, that we need to be creating systems where more New Zealanders want to be part of our future, to stay here, to have the skills and the education and the training to stay here and to be part of it, and we just want to make sure that that can be implemented in a transparent, a robust and a fair and an equitable way. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Members, we come to the vote on Part 2. First, we have the Minister's amendments as set out on SOP number 185. The question is that the amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party votes called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes in favour.
Māori Party.
2 in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
ACT New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 in favour.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 105, the noes are 15. The amendments are agreed to. The question now is that Part 2, as amended, stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party votes called for. Ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes in favour.
Māori Party.
2 in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
ACT New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 in favour.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 105, the noes are 15. Part 2 as amended will stand part. We now come to debate on Part 3. This is clauses 63 to 68 in Schedule 3. The question is that Part 3 stand part. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to take a short 20-minute call on